Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the end of the year book survey. I'm not sure who this was originally created by. I see a lot of people on BookTube doing it, so I'm going to try to hunt down the original video and leave a link if I can find it down below. But anyway, stick around to hear all about the books I read in 2020. Okay, let me start by saying that I'm pretty sure you're only supposed to have one book for all of these questions. I have multiple for most of them. I had a really good reading year, so it was really hard for me to choose just one. But saying that, let's get into it. The first question is, what was your all-time favorite book this year? Mine, I have two. So first is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and also A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Both those books I really enjoyed. I was so enthralled in the world and just everything about it. I really love A Court of Thorns and Roses and Sarah J. Maas in general, and I just felt like there was a lot in From Blood and Ash that reminded me of that. I really love romance fantasy. I think it is probably one of my favorite genres. So those two definitely. The other one was one I just finished and it was the best. Oh my gosh, I just love this book. It's House in the Cerulean Sea. I can't stop raving about it. I actually don't have my copy because I dropped it off at my cousin's house. She's a social worker and I was like, you need to read this book right now. I know everyone on BookTube's talking about it, but for those of you who don't know, it's about this social worker who goes into a house and it's all of these like mythical orphaned children, and they all have these different powers and they're kind of looked down upon by society, and the social worker ends up really seeing the good in these kids, and there's such a cute romance and you just fall in love with the story. I was bawling when I finished this. It was just amazing. So I feel like that book will be a book that I just consistently reread throughout my lifetime. Like that's gonna go up there with like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and those classics. So those are the two books, From Blood and Ash, that whole series, and House in the Cerulean Sea. I have to look up the author. I will leave it down below. The next question is books you were excited about and thought you were gonna love more but didn't. I have two for this question as well. The first one is a sequel to a book I really liked. So I read A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and I really enjoyed it for what it was. I mean, it kind of felt like Grown Up Twilight a little bit, but it was so angsty and I loved it. However, the sequel, Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness, I hated, which is really odd because I love historical fiction. It's one of my favorite genres, and this is pretty much them going back in time to Elizabethan London, and I thought I would be really, really immersed and just love it. It was so boring. I felt like they didn't do anything the entire book, and it was a struggle to finish. I did finish the series and read the last book, and I did enjoy that, but this one in particular was not a fan of at all. And the other one is one that I thought I was gonna absolutely love, and everything about it sounds like something I would like, and that is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. Sorry about that. I just didn't feel connected to any of the characters. I couldn't get into it. Everything about it sounds like something I would like. You have a girl, it's a portal fantasy, it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but I just couldn't bring myself to enjoy it. I found it boring as well. But that's just my personal take. I know a lot of people absolutely adore this book. So if you are into fantasy, I would definitely give this a shot, especially if you like retellings. Next question is, what is the most surprising, in a good way or a bad way, book that you read? And for me, that is, in a good way, Daisy Jones and the Six. It is not a genre I would have picked up. I had absolutely no interest after reading the synopsis, but a good friend of mine told me that it was probably her favorite book she read this year, so I gave it a shot. I actually listened to it on Audible, and I suggest doing that. The narrators do such a good job. But it was such a good book. It's probably one of my favorites. It was close to my favorite book this year. Really enjoyed it, and it just follows this band and kind of the relationships between all the band members. And there was a little bit of a surprise ending that I didn't see. And overall, really good book. Definitely check out Daisy Jones and the Six. Next question is, what book did you push the most people to read? And I actually have 3 for this. So one, like I said earlier, is House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, just because it is such a good book that I feel like everyone, especially if you're working in the education or social work field, should definitely check out. The next one I mentioned in a few videos, and that is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I think that if you like thrillers, especially a winter thriller, you would really enjoy this book. I've pushed many people to read it that I know are into thrillers and mysteries. And lastly would be Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This book was recommended to me before I really got into fantasy, and this is the book that really helped me discover adult fantasy. I think it's actually new adult, but I read this like 5 years ago and it felt like adult. Either way, if you're trying to get into fantasy, I always suggest starting with this one just because Brandon Sanderson writes such amazing magic systems and his worlds always feel so immersive, and it's just great. So I recommended this to quite a few people this year. Next question is, what is your favorite new author you discovered this year? And that was super easy for me to decide. It is Jennifer L. Armentrout. I'm obsessed with her books. I just think they are so fun and so easy to read. I also like her. I mean, she engages with her fans. I have watched a few of her interviews and her Skypes, and she's just so funny and awesome. And so far I'm trying to read all the books she's written kind of like as I finish the more serious fantasy, or I've been reading a lot of memoirs lately. But once I finish one of those, I normally jump into a Jennifer L. Armentrout book just because they're a good time. So yeah, favorite author of 2020, Jennifer L. Armentrout. The next question is, what is your favorite book that you don't typically read or was out of your comfort zone? And that was easy. It was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This was mostly just out of my comfort zone. I had to be in a good place while reading this. It's about a girl who was, in her mind, she had a relationship with her teacher when she was in a boarding school. She was really sexually assaulted, but you get to see it from her perspective, and then you get to see how it affects her as an adult. And while it was a very intriguing read, it was also very hard to read. I just really felt for this girl, and it was hard. It took me a really long time to read because I really had to be in a happy headspace to get through it. But I definitely think it's worth a read. I think it could be very educational to some people. So definitely, if you get a chance, My Dark Vanessa, just know that it is super dark. The next question is, most thrilling, action-packed, or unputdownable book of the year. I think everyone's probably sick of me mentioning No Exit by Taylor Adams, so I'm going to skip that one. But Fireborn by Rosaria Munda, which it was unputdownable. I wouldn't say it was action-packed because the reason it was unputdownable really had to do with the politics and scheming that was going on. But I enjoyed this book immensely. I had such a hard time putting it down. And this is one of the books I remember literally sitting in my car and reading and not getting out until I finished. So definitely Fireborn by Rosaria Munda was one of the top books I read in 2020. Next question is, a book you read in 2020 that you will most likely want to reread next year. And I have 2. The number 1 is The Name on the Wind. The Name on the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, only because I DNF'd it because I couldn't stand the narrator, but so many people really love it that I want to give it another chance and actually finish the book before I pass judgment. And I know my friend is reading it right now and I'd like to talk to her about it. So I'm going to try to finish that next year. And the other one is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I really enjoyed this book, but I feel like if I reread it, I'll find some things that I missed the first time. I feel like I was so excited when it came out that I just devoured it and probably missed a lot of little details. So I have no idea when the sequel is coming out. I cannot wait, but I definitely want to give this a reread at some point next year. So Name on the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss and Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. Next question is, what is the favorite cover of a book you read in 2020? And I have 2 for this one as well. I have Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova, which I did really enjoy. I will be doing a review on this in the future. And the other one is kind of cheating because I'm only 401 pages into it. But To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Poloni. I'm sorry if I think it's the guy that wrote Aragon. I could be mistaken. But really liking this so far. It's a bit out of my comfort zone as far as genre. It's a little bit more sci-fi, but so far really good. But I think the cover was beautiful. That's part of the reason why I bought the book. The next question is, what is the most memorable character from 2020? And I have two for this, but in different ways. So for some reason, Galaxy Stern keeps coming back to me, but it's because I couldn't stand her. And she really annoyed me, and I just sometimes find myself thinking about that character in a negative way. So I was just super irritated by her personality 90% of the time. But in a good way, Light Song and Siri from Warbreaker. I read this with my husband via Audible, and we both loved Light Song. He was our favorite character. Also, I thought Siri just had a great personality. So probably my favorite too. Like I said, Brandon Sanderson just writes amazing characters. Next question is, what is the most beautifully written book you read in 2020? And for me, that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I loved her writing in this. I thought it was just lyrical and beautiful and really helped set the mood of the book. I honestly went into this with low expectations, even though everyone was talking about how much they loved it, just because it didn't seem like something I would be into, and I don't normally like prose like that. And I ended up loving this book. I remember I read it when I was sick, and it was in the middle of autumn, and it was just cozy, and I really enjoyed this book. I think I will 100% go back. That'll probably be one of my rereads of 2020, but definitely the most beautiful written book I've read this year, Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Next up is, what is the most thought-provoking or a life-changing book of 2020? Sorry to say, again, it is House in the Cerulean Sea. This book destroyed me. So 100%, definitely life-changing, made me think about things in a whole new way. I can't stress how much I loved and enjoyed this book. So definitely check out House in the Cerulean Sea when you get a chance. You won't regret it. It's so good. Get into the last few questions. The next question is, what is a book that you can't believe you waited until 2020 to read? And instead of doing book, I'm going to do genre. So I was never a big fan, or I was even not a big fan of, I just never explored romance or contemporary romance. And this winter, I've read a lot of contemporary romance novels, and I really enjoyed them a lot more than I thought I would. I'm going to give historical romance a shot next. And I think I just like romance in general, so that is slowly becoming one of my new favorite genres, as well as fantasy romance. So I started reading, like I said, From Blood and Ash, which I think just won a romance award, even though originally when I read it, I thought it was just fantasy. So enjoyed that, and then Deal with the Elf King, and there was another one about a nightmare that I really enjoyed. So definitely liking fantasy romance and just contemporary romance, and I'm definitely going to be giving historical romance a shot in the future. All right, last question is, what is the shortest and longest book you've read in 2020? The shortest book I read is Frederick Bachman's Deal of a Lifetime. Super tiny. I read this right before Christmas. It's not my favorite Bachman book. I also wasn't a huge fan of Anxious People, but I really loved Beartown. So it's kind of hit or miss with me and Bachman. So I have to definitely read a little bit more of him before I decide if he's one of my favorite authors. And the longest book I read is Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. However, I'm listening to that via audiobook. It's taking me quite a while. I kind of read a physical book and then I'll jump back to that. So I've been reading it for about 2 months now. It's taken up a lot of my phone storage, but I'm really enjoying it. So those are my shortest and longest book of 2020. All right, guys, that's it for my end of the year book survey of 2020. If you've read any of these books and enjoyed them, please let me know in the comments. I could talk about books all day. If you don't know, I post new videos every Tuesday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.